Hey guys, tonight we are going to step through the creaking, uneven doors of medieval Europe into two places that seem so similar you might think they were interchangeable, but you'd be dead wrong. Tonight, we're talking about the difference between an inn and a tavern in the Middle Ages. The flicker of torches will guide you along muddy streets, the smell of wood smoke and unwashed humanity pressing close. The air will be thick with voices, some welcoming, some suspicious. And though these two establishments might both promise warmth, food, and company, one is a lifeline for weary travelers, and the other is a trap you probably won't survive if you have too many ales and say the wrong thing to the wrong person. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now in your corner of the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine the year is 1374. You've been walking for days, your boots are cracked, your legs ache, and you can feel the grit of road dust in your teeth. The sun has dipped low and shadows are growing long over the thatched rooftops ahead. You finally reach the outskirts of a bustling market town. The smell of baking bread mingles with the tang of manure. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks sharply, and a bell tolls the hour from the church tower. You pass under a timber-framed arch into the heart of the town. Merchants are packing away their stalls, and farmers hurry past with baskets of eggs or bundles of onions. You spot the first sign of refuge, a carved wooden board swinging gently from an iron bracket, painted with a stylized bundle of wheat. That's the sign of an inn. Just across the street, a different sign swings in the evening breeze, this one painted with a foaming tankard. That's the tavern. 2 doors, 2 choices. The difference between them, everything. The inn is a place with beds upstairs, straw mattresses stuffed with chaff, but still better than sleeping in a ditch. There's a stable for your horse or a corner where a drover's mule can rest. You can get a hot meal pottage, maybe some roasted meat if the day's been good, and a spot at the fire to thaw your bones. The innkeeper keeps a ledger marking down names and payments for the authorities take note of who comes and goes. Travelers from faraway towns, messengers carrying letters sealed with wax pilgrims heading to a shrine all pass through the inn. The tavern, though, the tavern is different. There are no beds, no stables, no formal welcome. The tavern is for locals. It's where the blacksmith goes after work, to drink ale with the cooper, where gossip and grudges are poured as freely as the wine. Outsiders might wander in, but they'll be noticed immediately. The tavern keeper doesn't care who you are, as long as you've got coins for the next cup. But stay too long, drink too deep, and you might find yourself dragged outside by the scruff of your neck if someone decides they don't like your face. In the dim glow of late medieval life, these two places serve different worlds, one built on transience, the other on roots. The inn lives by the road, the tavern lives by the hearth. Both can be dangerous in their own way. At the inn, you risk being robbed by fellow travelers or cheated by the innkeeper. At the tavern, you risk stumbling into someone's private feud or overhearing a plot you'd rather not know about. But tonight, in this slow drift into the past, you decide to step into the inn first. The door creaks as you push it open, and the smell of warm bread and stewing meat greets you like a hand on your shoulder. The rushes on the floor are fresh enough to keep the worst of the smell down. Candles flicker in iron sconces, casting shifting shadows on the rough plaster walls. A broad man with thinning hair, probably the innkeeper, looks up from behind a heavy oak counter. He doesn't smile, but his eyes flick down to your boots and back up to your face. "Room for the night?" he asks, his voice low and businesslike. You nod already, picturing the moment when you can kick off your boots and stretch your aching legs. He reaches for a wooden tally stick, scratches a mark into it, and then calls for a serving girl. She appears from the kitchen with a wooden tray, her apron smudged with flour, and beckons you toward the stairs. You follow your boots thudding against the worn treads. The room she shows you is small, a narrow bed, a stool, a chest with a cracked lid. The single window is shuttered, but a draft still slips in through the gaps. She leaves you there with a nod, and you set down your pack. The bed looks lumpy, but it's clean enough, the sheets smelling faintly of lavender. Downstairs, you can hear the low murmur of voices, travelers trading news, the occasional bark of laughter. The inn is a crossroads, a place where the world passes through in fragments. And tonight, you're one of those fragments. Still, you can't help glancing out the window toward the tavern sign across the street. Its painted tankard swings slowly, almost invitingly, as if promising something the inn cannot give. You'll find out soon enough. For now, you let your tired body sink into the quiet hum of the inn's evening life, not yet knowing that tomorrow's dawn will draw you across that muddy street into a different world entirely, one where the rules are rougher and the welcome less certain. The smell of the stew downstairs draws you like a thread pulling at your chest. You descend the creaking stairs slowly, hand-brushing, the smooth, worn banister polished by countless palms before yours. The common room of the inn feels warmer now, fuller alive with the chatter of travelers and the occasional burst of laughter from a corner table. You take a seat on a bench near the fire, the glow painting the faces of those around you in soft gold. To your left, a man in a faded green cloak is gesturing broadly, spinning a tale of how he barely escaped a pack of wolves on the road from Rouen. Across from him, a merchant with a salt and pepper beard leans forward, eyes wide, not necessarily because he believes the story, but because it passes the time before bed. The inn, you realize, is as much a stage as it is a shelter. Every night, new players arrive, tell their part, and vanish into the next morning mist. The serving girl appears with a trencher, half a loaf of coarse bread, hollowed slightly to hold a ladle of pottage, thick with barley turnips and a few precious slivers of meat. Steam curls upward, carrying the scent of onions and herbs. You dig in the warmth, seeping into your bones with every bite. Meals at an inn aren't meant to impress. They're meant to keep you walking the next day. From time to time, the door opens and a draft sweeps through. A pair of damp-faced pilgrims in threadbare cloaks shuffle in their wooden badges, clinking softly as they pull them off and shake the rain from their shoulders. The innkeeper greets them with the same curt nod he gave you earlier, already moving to fetch the tally stick. It strikes you that every guest here is a momentary presence, a fleeting figure whose name will be forgotten by the next fortnight. That's the lifeblood of the inn constant change. And yet, just beyond those wooden walls, the tavern hums with a different heartbeat entirely. You catch the sound through the shutters when the wind changes louder, voices sharper, laughter, the clink of cups, and the scrape of stools on a floor that's never quite level. The tavern doesn't close its doors when the beds upstairs are all full because it has no beds at all. It doesn't turn away the local miller who comes every night, nor the 3 young farm hands already deep into their 3rd round before sunset. As the meal settles in your stomach, your thoughts wander there across the street. In your mind, you picture the inside of the tavern, low ceiling beams blackened by smoke, air thick with the tang of ale and unwashed tunics. The tavern keeper's wife, broad-shouldered and quick with her tongue, shouting across the room for someone to mind their manners. Dice rattling in a wooden cup. The occasional thud of a fist hitting the table, not in anger, but in the kind of emphasis only drink can inspire. Inns and taverns both sell drink, of course, but their drinking worlds are different. At the inn, wine and ale are part of the service, a drink to wash down supper, to ease sore muscles before sleep. At the tavern, drink is the service. No one comes there looking for a bed. They come looking for company, for release, for the loosening of tongues that only strong drink can coax. If the inn is the hearth you pass by on your journey, the tavern is the fire you sit beside until you forget the hour. Travelers sometimes step into the tavern, but they remain outsiders. Your accent might be strange, your clothes unfamiliar, your stories irrelevant to the man who has been brewing gossip in that same corner for 10 years. Some nights, a stranger is welcomed, offered a seat, a cup, perhaps a question or two. But other nights, the same stranger is met with silence or worse, a challenge. You wouldn't know until you stepped inside. The fire at the inn is beginning to burn low, the logs collapsing into a bed of glowing embers. One by one, travelers rise from the benches, rubbing their eyes, stretching stiff backs, shuffling off to their rooms. The innkeeper busies himself wiping down tables, his gaze flitting to the door, as though measuring whether the last stragglers will soon retire. But you're not quite ready for bed. Maybe it's the pull of curiosity. Maybe it's the faint hum of energy drifting from across the street. You decide that before the night is over, you will at least poke your head into the tavern. The thought sends a small ripple of excitement through you, a kind of thrill that comes from knowing you're about to step into a place with rules that don't belong to you. You rise, setting your empty trencher on the counter, and the innkeeper's eyes follow you. Perhaps he knows where you're going. Perhaps he's seen too many guests cross the street and return hours later with split lips and lightened purses. He says nothing, only nods as you pull on your cloak and step into the cool night air. The street is quieter now, though a few dogs wander in the shadows, tails low, ears twitching. The tavern's sign swings lazily above its door, the painted foam on the tankard faded and cracked from years of rain. As you approach, the muffled sound of voices swells into a low roar, punctuated now and then by laughter loud enough to carry into the night. Your hand hovers over the iron latch. Somewhere inside, mugs are slamming down onto tables. Boots are scuffing against floorboards. A fiddler's bow is drawing a tune from a single string. This is not the orderly hum of the inn. This is chaos with its own rhythm. You press the latch down. The door opens. Heat and noise spill out in a rush, wrapping around you like a rough blanket. The air smells of ale, sweat, and roasting meat. Eyes turn toward you, some curious, some indifferent, one or two narrowing just slightly. You're in now, part of the tavern's night, whether you're ready or not. The door swings shut behind you, muffling the outside world, until it's just you and this room of strangers. The tavern is small, low-roofed, its ceiling beams so close overhead you feel you could reach up and touch them. They're blackened with smoke, each one as crooked as the teeth of an old man, and hung here and there with bunches of drying herbs meant to mask the smell of beer gone stale. Your eyes adjust slowly to the light lanterns hung from hooks in the rafters. their flames dancing inside horn-paneled casings. Shadows leap across the walls, twisting over the plaster like restless spirits. The air is warmer here, thick with the mingled scents of yeast-grease damp wool, and something faintly metallic, probably from the iron poker leaning against the hearth. The tavern keeper stands behind a rough-hewn counter. He's a thick-bodied man, with a face carved in permanent suspicion, polishing a cup with a rag that looks dirtier than the cup. His gaze tracks you as you make your way toward an empty spot at the end of the bar, past a knot of men hunched over a dice game. Their coins clink as they toss them into a small wooden bowl, the sound sharp against the steady drone of voices. Someone bumps your shoulder as they pass, whether by accident or design, you can't tell. No apology follows. The tavern isn't a place for delicate manners. It's a place where personal space is an unfamiliar concept, where elbows knock, boots tread on toes, and words are sometimes slurred into fists. You sit the bench, creaking under your weight. The tavern keeper shuffles over, still eyeing you, as though trying to place your face in a mental ledger of who belongs and who doesn't. He grunts ale in a tone that makes it sound less like a question and more like the only sensible answer. You nod. The cup arrives a moment later, wooden rim chipped, sloshing with a cloudy amber liquid. You take a sip. It's warm, slightly sour, but not unpleasant. Stronger than the watered wine you had at the inn. The drink loosens the knot in your shoulders, though it also sharpens the edge of your awareness. The conversations around you are a low-voiced jumble, snatches of gossip, bargaining over grain prices, a dispute about whose oxen trampled whose fence. In the corner near the hearth, a fiddler saws out a tune on a battered instrument with only 3 strings. It's fast foot-tapping meant for dancing, but no one is dancing tonight. Instead, a group of younger men farmhands, by the look of their mud-stained boots, are singing along loudly to a chorus. They half remember their voices weaving in and out of tune. Each time the fiddler reaches the end of a verse, they thump the table with open palms in a kind of drunken applause. The tavern's layout is crude but functional, a hearth at one end, the bar at the other, and benches and trestle tables crammed in between. Along one wall, shelves hold stoneware jugs and a few precious pewter mugs. On another, a long wooden board displays small clay cups filled with salted peas and roasted broad beans for sale, a cheap snack to keep drinkers thirsty. A woman moves among the tables with practiced speed. She's not dressed like the serving girl at the inn. Her skirts are darker, her hair tucked under a kerchief that's seen better days. She takes empty cups in one hand and coins in the other, trading them without a wasted step. The locals greet her by name, some with a smile, others with a joke you suspect has been told too many times. She knows exactly which customers will pay promptly and which will try to charm their way to an extra cup before their purse comes out. As the evening deepens, the tavern fills, not with travelers, but with townsfolk who have walked here from homes scattered along the muddy lanes outside. A cooper's apprentice arrives, still wearing his leather apron. A washerwoman with red-chapped hands claims a bench near the fire. 2 older men settle into the corner nearest the door, their heads bent close as they mutter about taxes and the reeve's latest demands. No one here cares if you're a stranger unless you try to stand out. You quickly learn the unspoken rule: keep your head low, drink at a steady pace, and let the tavern's rhythm carry you along. Interfere with that rhythm and you'll hear about it. The ale warms your throat and softens the sharp edges of the day, but it also blurs the line between camaraderie and conflict. Across the room, a small disagreement is flaring. 2 men, one with a face like weathered oak, The other, young enough to still have down on his chin, are arguing over the outcome of a card game. Voices rise, chairs scrape. The fiddler stops mid-note. For a moment the air stills. Then the older man laughs a booming sound that fills the tavern and claps the younger on the shoulder. The tension dissolves into a round of refilled cups. Just another wave in the tavern's nightly tide. Yet you know this tide can turn. The same laughter that fills the room now could be replaced in an instant with shouts. The same hand that claps a shoulder could close into a fist. That's the tavern's danger. It's a place of quick changes where merriment can curdle faster than milk in summer heat. For now, though, the music starts again, the fiddler's bow dancing across his strings. A man at the next table offers you a salted pea from his clay cup, and you accept the simple act, earning you a nod of acknowledgement. You're still an outsider, but perhaps not entirely unwelcome. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you recall the quiet order of the inn across the street. Its ledger, its neat rooms, its careful separation of strangers. Here in the tavern, no such neatness exists. The people, the drink, the talk, all spill over each other. And you begin to understand an inn keeps you safe from the night outside. A tavern throws you into the night's heart and dares you to swim. You sip the last of your ale, the warm liquid, leaving a faint bitterness on your tongue. The tavern has settled into that strange middle hour of the evening when the early drinkers have either gone home or slumped into quiet, and the ones who remain are deep into their cups, their voices thicker, their laughter longer. The fiddler has abandoned fast tunes for slower ones, drawing out notes that seem to hum in the wooden beams overhead. The man who offered you the salted pea earlier now leans in elbow, resting heavily on the table. He asks where you're from, not in the polite, idle way a fellow traveler might, but with the sharp curiosity of someone assessing whether you're worth knowing. You answer simply, offering the name of a distant town without embellishment. He nods slowly, filing the information away in whatever mental ledger he keeps. Here, every newcomer is weighed and measured, their words sifted for truth and weakness. Nearby, the two older men by the door have shifted topics from taxes to the Reeves' daughter, their voices lowered, though their eyes dart around the room as if checking for listeners. That's another thing about taverns. They're not just drinking halls. They're clearinghouses for information places where whispers travel faster than carts on the high road. A single overheard remark can make or break a man in a small town. You've heard stories of deals struck in taverns over cups of ale, grain sold, debts forgiven, even marriages arranged or broken. The ale loosens tongues and lowers guards, but it can also make promises too easy to give harder to keep once morning comes. A farmer might agree to sell a cow in the tavern, only to regret it when the drink wears off. A craftsman might boast of his skill only to find himself committed to work he cannot deliver. The tavern keeper knows this. He pours steadily, eyes flicking across the room, cataloging each guest's state of sobriety. He's seen more than his share of brawls start over nothing, a spilled drink, a jostled elbow, a careless jest. And though he's no brawler himself, his size alone is enough to command caution. Behind him, hanging from a hook on the wall, is a short oak cudgel, not decorative. In a darker corner, you notice two men playing at dice. One keeps his hand cupped over the table after each throw, his expression unreadable. The other leans in, eyes narrowed, muttering under his breath. The pile of coins between them is small, but the intensity is high. Dice games in taverns are rarely just about the coins. They're about pride status and the small victories that matter in a world where life offers few. The air grows thicker as the fire burns lower, the smoke hanging stubbornly in the rafters. The smell of ale and sweat is heavier now, and your tunic clings slightly to your back. You can hear the rain outside soft at first, then steadier padding against the shutters. The sound seems to press the drinkers deeper into their benches, making the tavern feel both more claustrophobic and more intimate. It strikes you that the tavern is the town's shared living room. Everyone knows where everyone sits, whose laugh will boom first, which man will fall asleep by the fire before the night is done. Strangers like you are rare ingredients in this nightly stew, and they can change the flavor in unpredictable ways. Sometimes strangers bring fresh stories and a taste of the wider world. Other times they bring trouble. The man beside you has moved on to telling a tale of the road, how he once saw a cart overturned in the marsh and helped rescue its goods before the mire claimed them. You nod politely, though you can't tell if it's truth or tavern truth, that special variety of storytelling in which facts are optional, but entertainment is compulsory. He laughs at his own punchline, slapping the table hard enough to make your cup jump. You notice the washerwoman by the hearth leaning toward the cooper's apprentice, speaking low, but urgently. He shakes his head, muttering something you can't hear. She presses again, her voice rising a notch, and his expression hardens. You look away. It's none of your business. Yet you feel the undercurrent threads of personal disputes and alliances weaving through the room, invisible to anyone who doesn't live here. It's a stark contrast to the inn across the street, where conversations are polite but distant, where no one expects to see the same faces twice. The tavern is built on repetition, on seeing the same people night after night, until their patterns become as familiar as the creak of the floorboards. And that means every misstep is remembered. There's no vanishing into anonymity here. If you wrong someone, they will be waiting tomorrow, and the next night, and the next. You take another sip of ale, feeling its warmth mingle with the heat from the fire. Part of you is drawn in by this closeness, this sense of belonging, even if it isn't yours. Another part is wary, sensing the danger in a place where familiarity can curdle into grudges that last lifetimes. From somewhere outside, the church bell tolls, marking the late hour. Some patrons barely notice. Others stir reluctantly, gathering cloaks and coins before stepping back into the rain. The fiddler sets down his bow and flexes stiff fingers, rubbing them against his knees. You consider leaving, crossing back to the inn's quieter embrace. But the tavern still hums with a kind of restless energy. It's a web, and you're caught in it for one more hour, long enough perhaps to see what happens when the drink runs low, the night runs late, and tempers run high. The hour grows heavier, pressing down on the room like a damp wool blanket. The earlier chatter has thinned to fewer voices, but those that remain are louder, less measured. The kind of volume born not of numbers, but of drink. The air is dense with the scent of sour ale and damp wool cloaks steaming near the fire. The man beside you, your salted pea acquaintance, has shifted from amiable conversation to muttering about someone across the room. His tone is sharp now, his eyes fixed on a broad-shouldered fellow leaning on the bar. "Thief," he says under his breath, though loud enough for you to catch. You're not sure if he expects you to respond, so you nod vaguely, keeping your face neutral. A moment later, the fiddler's bow stills again. A sharp scrape of a bench cuts through the room. The broad-shouldered man straightens and turns toward your neighbor, his jaw set. The room's hum lowers instantly, like a candle flame flickering in a sudden draft. The two men stare at each other for a long heartbeat. You sense the weight of years behind that look, old grudges, unpaid debts, or maybe just too many nights sharing the same cramped air. It happens quickly, a harsh word, a step forward, a shove. The bench topples. Someone laughs a brittle goading sound, and then the first punch is thrown. The tavern erupts in a burst of noise. Cups spill, stools clatter. The broad-shouldered man drives your neighbor back against the wall, the two of them grappling like dogs over a bone. A few patrons cheer, others lean back to keep clear. No one rushes to break it up, not yet. Fights in taverns are part of the rhythm. They flare, burn, and fizzle unless someone reaches for steel. The tavern keeper watches from behind the bar, his expression unreadable. Then, when it looks as though the smaller man's head might meet the edge of the hearth, he moves. His voice cuts through the shouting, deep, commanding, and the cudgel appears in his hand. One sharp bang against the bar, and the noise dies just enough for him to bark a single word. The fighters hesitate, breathing hard, glaring at each other like two wolves deciding if the other is worth the final bite. Then the broad-shouldered man spits on the floor, grabs his cloak, and stomps toward the door. The smaller man follows, still muttering curses. The door slams, and for a moment the only sound is the hiss of rain outside. Slowly, conversation seeps back in. Someone writes the fallen bench. The fiddler shrugs and starts another tune, softer this time. The tavern closes around the space the fight left behind, as if nothing happened. But you feel the tremor still in the air. This was not just a drunkard's quarrel. This was a reminder. The tavern remembers every slight, every insult. It keeps score. You drain the last of your ale thinking of the inn across the street, the quiet ledger, the predictable order. Here no ledger protects you. The tavern is its own record held in the minds of the people who drink here night after night. If your name comes up in that record for the wrong reason, you won't get to rewrite it easily. The washerwoman by the hearth gives you a small, knowing glance. Perhaps she saw you watching. Perhaps she knows that fights are half the tavern's entertainment and half its danger. She leans closer to her companion and speaks in a low voice you can't catch. A few more patrons leave pulling hoods over their heads before stepping into the rain. The room feels looser without them, but the undercurrent remains. You can almost taste it, a mix of shared history, unfinished arguments, and the unspoken knowledge that tomorrow night the same people will be here again, sitting in the same spots, telling the same stories, unless one of them is in the stocks or worse. A man at the far table gestures for you to join him. You hesitate. It could be nothing more than a friendly offer to share a drink. It could also be an invitation to a game of dice you're destined to lose. In the tavern, generosity and cunning share the same smile. You decide to stay where you are, signaling instead for another cup. The tavern keeper fills it without a word, the amber liquid sloshing over the rim as he slides it toward you. Your fingers brush the damp wood of the counter as you catch it. Outside, the rain drums harder. Inside, the tavern is tightening around the remaining few who are unwilling or unable to go home. The fiddler plays on his tune, weaving through the thick air like a thread, keeping the whole fabric from tearing apart. You take a slow sip and let it anchor you, knowing that in this place, even the quiet moments are edged with risk. The rain outside is no longer just background noise, it's a steady drumming presence that makes the tavern feel like the only warm, dry place left in the world. You find yourself leaning into that comfort, the ale softening the ache in your shoulders, the heat of the fire wrapping you like a blanket you didn't know you needed. The earlier commotion has faded to a low murmur, replaced by the gentle clink of cups and the occasional crackle of the hearth. This is the hour when the tavern changes shape. It shrinks somehow, not in size but in mood. The loud and boisterous are gone or quieted. Those who remain settle into their favorite corners, as if returning to rooms in their own homes. Conversations lower, becoming the kind meant for only a few ears. This is when secrets are traded, when confidences are given and sometimes sold. The washerwoman is still by the fire now, darning a wool stocking, with the same steady rhythm as the rain outside. Beside her, the cooper's apprentice has shifted from restless fidgeting to watching her needle flash in the firelight. There's a familiarity between them, not exactly friendship, but the easy awareness of two people who've seen each other most evenings for years. At the bar, a gray-bearded man you hadn't noticed before nurses a small clay cup of something darker than ale. He sits very still, his hands curled around it, as if coaxing the last warmth into his fingers. The tavern keeper brings him another without a word, setting it down gently, almost respectfully. Some patrons earn that kind of treatment, the sort that says they've been here longer than anyone can remember. Your salted pea acquaintance has vanished, leaving behind only the faint smell of damp wool where he sat. In his place, a younger man slides onto the bench, narrow-faced, quick-eyed. He offers you a smile that's more a suggestion than a greeting. You're not from here, he says, not as a question, but a statement he's already sure of. You confirm it with a small nod. He leans closer, lowering his voice. Don't drink too much here your first night. Folks remember more than you think. You sense a warning in his tone, though whether it's born of kindness or calculation, you can't tell. He glances around the room as if making sure no one's watching, then shifts the topic entirely, asking about the roads from your town, whether they're still safe to travel. His questions are casual enough, but you feel the subtle pull of someone gathering threads for a tapestry you can't yet see. A faint waft of roasting meat drifts from the kitchen pork, maybe with a hint of rosemary. A few patrons glance toward the smell, but no one moves to order it. In a tavern like this, the kitchen is rarely for customers. The food might be for the keeper's family or for certain favored patrons who've paid for more than ale. The fiddler is gone now, his corner empty, but for the faint indentation, his stool left in the rushes. In his place, two men have begun a slow game of nine men's Morris, the little wooden pieces clacking softly on the board. Their conversation is so low you can barely hear it, but you catch the occasional word names you don't recognize places just far enough away to feel mysterious. You realize how deeply the tavern thrives on layers of knowing. There's what's said aloud for anyone to hear, what's murmured just loud enough for a neighbor, and what's never spoken at all, but carried in the glances, gestures, and silences between patrons. The inn across the street deals in straightforward exchanges, coin for bed, coin for food. But here, every exchange carries something else, a favor, owed a grudge, renewed a piece of news tucked away for later use. The younger man at your side finishes his cup and stands pulling his hood up before stepping into the rain. He leaves you with a final glance, one that lingers just long enough to make you wonder if you've just passed some unspoken test. The tavern keeper comes by collecting empty cups. Another, he asks. His tone is flatter now, the faintest trace of weariness creeping in. You nod, and he pours without measuring the liquid glugging into the cup, with a rhythm he's perfected over decades. The fire pops loudly, sending a brief spray of sparks up the chimney. You find yourself watching them rise and vanish, thinking of how easily nights here must blend together. How one evening's laughter or fight becomes the next evening's memory, and then just another part of the tavern's long, smoky history. In this small, dim-lit room, you feel the divide between inn and tavern more sharply than ever. The inn gives you a place to rest unseen. The tavern lets you be seen and never forgotten. Which of those is safer depends entirely on who you are and on how well you can read the room. The hour is late enough now that the rain outside feels permanent, a black curtain drawn across the world beyond these walls. Inside the tavern has quieted even further, but the quiet isn't restful. It's the thick, lingering sort that comes when only the most stubborn or most reluctant patrons remain. The air is warmer, heavier. The fire has burned down to a bed of embers, sending out a steady, gentle heat that makes your eyelids heavy. The gray-bearded man at the bar is still there, his clay cup refilled at least twice since you first noticed him. He hasn't spoken more than a handful of words all evening, but there's a gravity to him, like a stone at the center of a shallow pond, with all the ripples moving outward from where he sits. A few times other patrons have drifted over to murmur something to him, only to nod at whatever short reply he gives before returning to their seats. You get the feeling that in this tavern he's a kind of anchor. Near the hearth, the washerwoman has finished her mending and now simply sits, hands folded in her lap, eyes on the fire. The cooper's apprentice has dozed off beside her head, tilted back against the wall mouth, slightly open. She doesn't wake him. People here seem to have an unspoken agreement about letting certain moments pass undisturbed. The tavern keeper moves slower now, not from fatigue so much as inevitability. He's no longer eager to pour. Instead, he measures each request against the sense of whether it will mean trouble before closing. When two men at the far table raise their cups in a half-hearted signal, he ignores them for a few minutes, before finally strolling over his voice low and deliberate. The message is clear, it's nearly time to go home. You notice the unlit corners of the room more acutely now. They seem deeper shadows, stretching like silent corridors to somewhere you'll never walk. The earlier noise and movement filled those spaces. Now they press in, making the tavern feel smaller, closer. You hear a drip somewhere in the kitchen, the faint sigh of the wind through a crack in the shutters. Someone nearby exhales a long breath, then says something about tomorrow's work, in a tone that suggests they're trying to convince themselves as much as anyone else. That's the thing about the tavern's last hour. It's not just about running out of drink. It's about facing the walk home, the cold, the chores waiting in the morning. Leaving means returning to the ordinary. Staying means clinging a little longer to the warm suspension of the night. The younger man who warned you earlier slips back inside from the rain, his hood dripping. His eyes scanning the room quickly before settling on the gray-bearded man. He crosses over, leans down, and murmurs something too soft to catch. The older man nods once, just once, but it's enough. A coin changes hands discreetly, the kind of movement you'd miss if you weren't already looking. You've begun to notice how the tavern's most important exchanges don't happen in the loud hours. They happen now, when the few remaining patrons are the ones who can be trusted, or at least relied upon, not to speak openly about what they've seen. An inn might have a ledger of names. A tavern keeps a ledger of favors, secrets, and debts, and it's written in glances rather than ink. The tavern keeper finally speaks up, his voice carrying through the quiet last cups. No one argues. The two men at the far table shrug and drain what's left. The washerwoman nudges the apprentice awake, his eyes blinking groggily as she gathers her mending. The gray-bearded man stands slowly stretching his back with a grimace before pulling his cloak around him. As you rise, you feel the shift in the air. The magic of the tavern, its heat, its noise, its unguarded moments is already slipping away, replaced by the practical business of locking doors and barring shutters. You step outside into the night, and the rain hits you like a sudden reminder that the tavern exists in its own pocket of time, one you can't take with you. Across the street, the inn is dark except for a single lantern burning in the window. You cross over boots squelching in the mud, the warmth of the tavern still in your bones, but fading. The inn door creaks open under your hand, and you slip inside, leaving the noise, the smells, and the tangled web of the tavern behind. Tomorrow you'll have to decide which side of the street to cross again. And you suspect you already know that whichever you choose, you'll be stepping into a different kind of story. Morning comes in with a dull gray light, the kind that makes it hard to tell if it's truly day or just a softer shade of night. Your sleep at the inn was better than you expected. Warmer, quieter, the straw mattress holding its shape under you. The faint smell of lavender in the bedding lingers a small mercy compared to the reek of ale-stained tunics that must still hang heavy in the tavern across the street. You rise slowly, your body reminding you of yesterday's long walk. Downstairs, the inn's common room is transformed from the evening's bustle. The fire burns lower, its embers coaxed back into life for the morning meal. The innkeeper is already awake, moving briskly between the hearth and the counter. A pot of pottage simmers, scenting the air with barley, onion, and herbs. He greets you with a nod, no more, no less, before setting a trencher of bread on the table. Other guests sit scattered in small knots. A pair of merchants are packing their ledgers and cloth samples into leather satchels. A young woman in a pilgrim's cloak clutches a wooden cross, murmuring a prayer before breaking her bread. A messenger in a dark doublet studies a folded parchment, as if the ink might change if he looks long enough. These people share the same room, but not the same lives. By nightfall, they'll all be somewhere else. That's the quiet, predictable rhythm of the inn. People arrive, rest, and leave. No one expects to see the same faces again. Conversations here are safe to keep shallow. You might exchange news of the road, mention a shrine you passed, or warn about a flooded bridge, but you won't swap confessions over the fire. The inn is built for anonymity, and yet your eyes stray toward the window. Across the muddy street, the tavern's sign still sways gently, the painted tankard glistening with a fresh coat of rain. The shutters are closed tight, but you can picture the room behind them. Mugs, stacked floors, swept the scent of stale drink stubbornly clinging to the air. Its regulars are likely still asleep, some in their own beds, others in less dignified places. You think of the washerwoman, the cooper's apprentice, the gray-bearded man. In the span of a few hours last night, you learned more about them than you know about anyone here at the inn. Not because you were told directly, but because the tavern's closeness leaves no choice. You overhear, you notice, you absorb. The inn, for all its comfort, is a closed book. The tavern is a book with its pages half torn and scribbled over, but you can't stop reading once you've opened it. After breakfast, you step outside into the cool air. The rain has eased, leaving puddles that reflect the washed-out sky. Merchants wheel carts down the street, calling to each other about prices and customers. Somewhere nearby, a rooster crows late, its voice ragged. You pass the tavern on your way to the market square. In daylight, it's humbler than it seemed last night, its timber frame sagging in places, its door patched and repatched. A few damp rushes lie outside, probably swept from the floor earlier. You half expect to see the tavern keeper leaning in the doorway, but it's shuttered and silent. The building feels like a sleeper between breaths gathering itself for the next night's work. And that's the crucial difference you're starting to understand. An inn exists for the day as much as the night. Its trade is steady, dependable, tied to the movement of travelers. A tavern lives for the night, its heartbeat strongest, when the world outside is dark and the streets are empty. In the market, you overhear two men speaking about the tavern as they stack crates of apples. One laughs about last night's show, miming a clumsy punch. The other shakes his head. "Better him than me," he says, tossing a bruised apple aside. The memory of last night's fight is already part of the day's gossip. By evening, it will have been retold, exaggerated, and stored in the tavern's living history. The inn's stories, if it has any, never travel far. By tomorrow, no one in this town will remember you stayed there unless you do something remarkable. The tavern, however, doesn't let go so easily. You could be remembered for years, for better or worse. On your way back toward the inn, a small boy darts past you, kicking a stick through the puddles. He glances at the tavern door as he passes, then at you as if wondering whether you belong on that side of the street. You realize that in a place like this, which door you choose shapes the way people see you. The inn says you're passing through. The tavern says you're part of the fabric. Standing in the middle of the street, you can feel the pull of both. The inn offers safety and distance. The tavern offers belonging and risk. Neither is truly without danger. One hides you in plain sight, the other makes you visible, and visibility can be a kind of protection or a kind of trap. By mid-morning, the market is in full swing. Merchants cry out over the din of clattering cartwheels and the bleating of penned sheep. You weave through the crowd, but your thoughts are on something quieter. The difference in the way this town governs the two buildings across from each other. The inn where you slept, and the tavern where you drank. In the Middle Ages, neither was simply a private venture free to operate as it pleased. Both were bound in their own ways to the shifting tides of law, taxation, and local authority. But the way those rules fell was never quite the same. The inn was part of the machinery of travel and trade. An innkeeper didn't just sell beds. He was an unofficial agent of the crown or the local lord. He was expected to keep a record of travelers, who they were, where they came from, and when they left. In times of unrest, these records could be vital for tracing suspicious movement. The ledger in the inn wasn't simply for counting coins. It was a tool for surveillance in a world without passports or border checks. Because of this, innkeepers often enjoyed a measure of protection from the authorities. But it came at the price of responsibility. If a criminal lodged at the inn and was later caught, the innkeeper could face heavy fines or worse for failing to report him. Likewise, if the food was found to be spoiled or the ale watered beyond reason, the local reeve could revoke the innkeeper's license. Taverns, on the other hand, lived under a different kind of scrutiny. They were the beating hearts of gossip and informal politics, and the authorities knew it. A tavern could ferment more than ale. It could ferment dissent. A loose tongue after 3 cups might speak against the reeve's taxes or the lord's justice. It might whisper about brewing rebellions or schemes against neighbors. For this reason, taverns were watched closely. In some towns, the constable would make a habit of dropping by in the evening, not for a drink, but for a listen. Taxes fell differently, too. Inns often paid a levy tied to the number of beds they offered, or the amount of grain they consumed for bread and pottage. Taverns were taxed more directly on the drink they sold, ale, wine, mead. In some places, the ale taster, an actual official position, would visit regularly to check quality and measure strength. If the ale was weak or foul, the tavern keeper could be fined or shamed in the marketplace. But there was a subtler tax. Both shared the obligation to host officials without charge when required. A royal messenger on urgent business, a sheriff's man carrying a warrant, a cleric sent to investigate a heresy, any of these could arrive, and expect bedboard and ale without opening their purses. For the inn, this was a manageable inconvenience. For the tavern, it could be a full night's profit gone in one sitting. The politics of proximity mattered too. Inns were often situated along main roads or near town gates, placed to catch travelers before they wandered elsewhere. Taverns could be found anywhere from market squares to the backs of narrow lanes, but those in central spots became natural gathering places. This visibility could be a blessing or a curse. The tavern across from your inn sat on a prime corner close enough to hear the church bell and smell the market bread. That meant more foot traffic, but also more eyes on its door. You think back to last night, to the exchange of coin between the younger man and the gray-bearded one. In a town like this, such a moment might have been nothing, or it might have been part of the tavern's other business, the one it shares with inns only in whispers, information brokering. Inns collected facts from travelers. Taverns collected facts from locals. Both streams could be useful to the right buyer. The men and women who ran these places were more than innkeepers or tavern keepers. They were quiet operators in the social and political life of their towns. They knew who was coming, who was leaving, who was cheating whom, and who might be worth keeping an eye on. They could feed a traveler, but they could also feed a rumor to the reeve or the sheriff, or choose to let it die in the rushes underfoot. Some innkeepers cultivated an air of professionalism, their establishments clean and orderly, their rules posted where guests could see them. A tavern keeper rarely bothered with rules on the wall. The rules were in his face, his stance, the way he poured or refused a cup. The law might set broad limits, but inside those walls his authority was absolute, until of course it wasn't. A single visit from the constable, a single accusation of harboring thieves or allowing seditious talk could shut a tavern down for weeks. Yet both endured. The inn because it was necessary. The tavern because it was irresistible. Law could prod and pry tax and threaten, but it couldn't remove the need for a place to sleep on the road, or the hunger for a place where ale and talk flowed together. You glance again across the street at the two signs, the tidy bundle of wheat for the inn, the foaming tankard for the tavern. Two doors, two worlds, both fenced in by rules that shaped everything they did, and both bending those rules in quiet ways to keep their doors open. From the outside, the innkeeper and the tavern keeper might seem like close cousins, both pouring drink, both keeping doors open to those with coin. But step inside their daily routines, and you'll see two very different lives shaped as much by the rhythms of their customers as by the laws that governed them. The innkeeper's day begins early, often before the first light filters into the street. Travelers rarely keep polite hours, and a guest bound for the next town might want bread and ale before the sun even clears the church steeple. So the innkeeper rises in the chill, stoking the fire, setting water to heat, and making sure yesterday's rushes are swept from the floor. He keeps a ledger within easy reach, its pages scored with names and dates, each one a record of who has come and gone. It's not just a formality, it's insurance. If a guest later causes trouble in the next town, the innkeeper can point to the entry and say, "Here you see, he stayed, he paid, he left." In a world where trust is a fragile currency, such records matter. The innkeeper also plays host to a revolving cast. Pilgrims with sore feet and earnest stories, merchants with an eye for profit. Messengers bearing news sealed in wax, perhaps even the occasional minor noble traveling with retainers. Every guest is both a customer and a potential witness to the quality or lack of the inn's hospitality. Too many complaints, and the reeve or lord might hear of it. For the tavern keeper, the day starts later. The morning hours belong to other trades, but when he does stir, his work is just as layered. First comes checking the ale and wine, making sure the casks are sound and the drink is fit for sale. A sour batch could ruin more than a night's business. It could bring fines or public shaming. He might send an apprentice to fetch more grain for brewing, or to a brewer in town for fresh barrels. Then there's the room itself. The tavern floor must be cleared of last night's mess, spilled drink, broken cups, the occasional forgotten cloak or dagger. The rushes need changing before the evening crowd tramples in, and the fire must be coaxed to life to drive out the damp. While the innkeeper prepares for a polite blend of strangers, the tavern keeper readies for a dense knot of regulars who know each other too well. The two also differ in the kind of diplomacy they practice. The innkeeper's is outward-facing, welcoming strangers, gauging who might be trouble, smoothing over small disputes before they grow. The tavern keeper's is inward-facing, keeping the peace among patrons who bring years of history into the same cramped room. He must know when to let an argument run its course and when to bring out the cudgel. Social standing, too, follows different lines. An innkeeper serving the needs of travelers and merchants might be respected as part of the town's commercial backbone. His establishment brings in outside coin, his work seen as a necessary link in trade and communication. The reeve may grumble about the inn's fees or its cleanliness, but he knows the town needs it. A tavern keeper, by contrast, often walks a narrower path. His house is a place of pleasure, but also of suspicion. Too much laughter too late at night, too many strangers at certain tables, and the whispers begin. Some see him as a man of the people, giving the town a hearth, where all may meet as equals. Others see him as a source of temptation and idleness, a man who profits from the loosening of tongues and the blurring of morals. Yet both have their power. The innkeeper can choose to shelter or turn away a traveler. The tavern keeper can decide who drinks and who doesn't. In a society where comfort and company are scarce commodities, such choices carry weight. Denying someone a bed on a stormy night can send them into real danger. Refusing a man a cup can mark him as unwelcome in his own town. And both are keepers of stories. The inn gathers tales from the road news of distant markets, rumors of war sightings, of strange omens. The tavern gathers tales from the hearth births, deaths, grudges, alliances. Together they form the oral network that binds the town to the wider world. In this way, the inn and the tavern are not just places of service, they are the two halves of the town's memory. It's easy in daylight to imagine them as separate worlds, but as you walk past both doors, you sense they are more like twin rivers flowing side by side, sometimes crossing in unseen channels beneath the surface. and you, for now, are a traveler drinking from both. You might think of the inn and tavern as self-contained little worlds, serving only the people who step through their doors. But in the Middle Ages, neither existed in isolation. Each was a hub in the town's web of trade and survival, feeding coin and goods through the community in ways both obvious and hidden. The inn was an economic anchor for travelers. Every merchant who stayed brought not just coin for the bed, but trade for the town's market. A cloth dealer might spend the night at the inn, and in the morning strike a deal with the local weaver. A drover bringing pigs to market might lodge there, his animals penned in the inn's yard, their sale the next day, putting meat on half the town's tables. Pilgrims heading toward a shrine might spend their last coins on candles or tokens from the market before resuming their journey. The innkeeper, in turn, bought from local suppliers bread from the baker meat, from the butcher ale from the brewer, candles from the chandler. Every loaf served to a traveler was already part of a small chain of transactions stretching across the town. Even the straw in the guest beds was cut, bundled, and sold by someone who depended on the inn's steady demand. The tavern, though it rarely sheltered travelers, pumped coin through the town in its own way. Ale was brewed locally, grain bought from nearby fields, barrels made by the cooper down the lane. A tavern that poured dozens of cups in a night kept several trades humming. The salted peas and roasted broad beans served to drinkers came from the market stalls. The firewood stacked behind the tavern came from a woodsman whose livelihood depended on keeping hearths hot. Even the broken mugs and cracked jugs fed the economy carried to the potter for repair, or replaced entirely another small purchase linking the tavern's bustle to the town's well-being. And then there were the subtler flows of money and goods. Inns often acted as informal banks for travelers. A merchant might leave a heavy chest in the inn's care while conducting business, trusting that the innkeeper's livelihood depended on protecting it. Taverns, meanwhile, could function as the meeting rooms where deals were struck, grain futures agreed upon over a shared jug, hiring terms, sealed with a handshake and a round of ale. The tavern was also the stage for the town's smaller, more personal economies. A washerwoman might quietly arrange to take in extra linens after overhearing a merchant complain about the state of his shirts. A shepherd might promise a share of his next lambing season to a friend who lends him a few coins for drink now. The exchange wasn't always formal or even written down. It lived in memory and obligation, in the quiet understanding that debts, whether of coin, goods, or loyalty, would be repaid. Inns and taverns also played their part in the town's survival during lean times. When famine loomed, the innkeeper might see fewer travelers, and the tavern might sell less ale. But the people who still came through their doors were often the ones with coin to spend, however sparingly. A careful innkeeper or tavern keeper could keep the town's poorest from starving by quietly extending credit or slipping a bit of bread to someone they knew wouldn't pay until spring, if at all. And of course, there was the less charitable side. Both establishments could also tighten the purse strings when times were bad, raising prices to protect their own stores, refusing service to those who couldn't pay. In a harsh winter, the warmth of either fire might be reserved for the coin-holding few, leaving others to find shelter elsewhere. Still, in the balance, inns and taverns were as much lifelines as they were luxuries. They kept craftsmen in work-fed mouths that didn't set foot inside their doors, and gave the town a place where money, goods, and opportunity could change hands quickly. Without them, trade slowed, news traveled less freely, and the delicate weave of local life began to fray. It's why even when church sermons railed against drunkenness, or when a noble's steward grumbled about inflated lodging fees neither inns nor taverns could be dispensed with. They were too tightly bound into the living fabric of the town. Remove one and the threads around it slackened. Remove both and you risked unraveling the whole. Looking from the inn's warm doorway toward the tavern's shuttered front, you can almost see those invisible threads stretching between them, through the market, down the lanes, out to the fields beyond. They may trade in different currencies, one in shelter, one in fellowship, but together they keep the town's blood moving. If the inn and the tavern were the town's economic arteries, they were also its cultural lungs, breathing in the life of the community, exhaling it back in 1,000 small ways. The Middle Ages didn't have theaters, cinemas, or coffee houses as we know them now. Entertainment and fellowship lived in simpler, more compact spaces, and for most townsfolk, that meant stepping into one of these two doors. The inn's cultural role was subtle but significant. It was a crossing place for strangers, each bringing their own custom songs and stories. A pilgrim from a far-off shrine might share a hymn no one here had heard before. A merchant from Flanders could hum a fragment of a market tune from Bruges while sipping wine. Children of the innkeeper might learn their first foreign words not from a book, but from listening to guests barter in their native tongues. Travelers' tales gave locals a broader view of the world. Around the inn's fire, people heard about distant cities, strange foods, foreign fashions, and the kinds of events that didn't reach small towns until months or even years later. And while the inn wasn't exactly a school, it was a place where curiosity was rewarded, where listening could teach you things that might one day prove valuable. The tavern's role was different, less about the far-flung world, more about weaving together the lives within a day's walk of its door. Here, songs were not just sung, they were owned. The same ballads rose night after night, with verses that might be altered to suit local humor or to poke fun at someone sitting in the very room. A fiddler might improvise a line about the cooper's crooked barrels to a round of jeers and laughter. Rituals took root in taverns. A man might always buy the first round on the Friday after market day. A group of friends might gather at the same table under the same beam, the grooves in the wood bearing the marks of their cups over years. These repeated acts became part of the town's rhythm, as dependable as the church bell or the sunrise. The tavern also served as a pressure valve. In a world where work was backbreaking, where daylight hours were dictated by the seasons, and where one's social role was tightly bound by birth, the tavern was a place where you could briefly step sideways out of that role. A farmhand might drink beside the Reeves' cousin. A widow might swap jokes with the miller. The hierarchies didn't vanish, but they softened in the candlelight and the heat of the hearth. And then there were the communal moments. In hard winters, the tavern was one of the few places warm enough to gather after dark. In times of celebration, a good harvest, a wedding feast, the tavern swelled with laughter and dance. An inn could host a celebration too, but it lacked the tavern's sense of collective ownership. The inn was a public house. The tavern was their house. Both spaces also shaped the unwritten rules of conduct. At the inn, civility was expected. Quarrels were rare, and when they happened, they were swiftly shut down. At the tavern, quarrels were part of the ecosystem, sometimes ending in reconciliation, other times leaving a bruise that would color interactions for years. Learning how to navigate these tensions was part of growing up in the town. Religion's influence threaded through both. Inns and taverns alike might close during major holy days, but they also provided stages for the blending of sacred and secular life. A pilgrim staying at the inn might draw a crowd to the tavern that night, eager to hear about relics and miracles over a shared jug. Even church feasts could spill into tavern gatherings, the line between piety and pleasure shifting with each cup. Through it all, these places nurtured the shared memory of the community. A joke born in a tavern could outlive the man it was first told about. A kindness shown at the inn, a bed given freely to a traveler, caught in a storm, might be recounted for decades as proof of the keeper's good heart. Stories became social currency, and inns and taverns were their mints. Looking back across the street, you see the two buildings not as rivals, but as companions in the same long work keeping the town connected, giving its people places to meet, speak, laugh, argue, and remember. Without them, the market would still sell goods, the church would still ring its bells, but something essential would be missing. The pulse would be slower, the breath shallower. For all their warmth and fellowship, both the inn and the tavern carried shadows that were never far from the candlelight. The Middle Ages was a world where safety was fragile, and every public house, whether meant for sleeping or drinking, lived under a low hum of risk. At the inn, the danger began with the simple fact that everyone staying there was a stranger to someone. You might share a table with a merchant one evening and wake to find he was a cut-purse who slipped away before dawn. Locks on doors were rare, and if you carried coin or valuables, you slept lightly or not at all. Even the innkeeper, for all his ledger-keeping, couldn't always tell a harmless wanderer from a man on the run. Some thieves made inns their hunting grounds. They would check in as guests, paying just enough to seem honest, then wait for the right moment to slip into another room or rifle through unattended packs. Others were bolder, robbing travelers on the road, and then using the inn's crowd as cover until it was safe to move on. Taverns had their own predators. Here the danger was less about stealth and more about confrontation. Drink loosened tempers as well as tongues, and a poorly timed word or even a look could spiral into violence. Knives and cudgels were never far from reach. A single insult could split the night open, and it wasn't always the customers who posed the threat. Tavern keepers themselves could be opportunists. Watered ale inflated prices, or the quiet swapping of your cup for a smaller one, were common tricks. Some ran crooked games of dice in the back, letting favored players win just enough to lure new victims into losing heavily. If the tavern keeper decided he didn't like you or liked your purse too much, you might find yourself on the wrong side of the door before the night was done. There was also the danger of association. In many towns, the tavern was where the disreputable gathered gamblers, smugglers, itinerant laborers, sometimes even outlaws in disguise. A respectable craftsman could tarnish his name by being seen too often at certain tables. Women who lingered without clear purpose were likely to be judged harshly, whether or not they deserved it. And if the priest caught wind of parishioners spending more time in the tavern than at Mass, sermons could take on a sharper edge the following Sunday. The church's suspicion ran deep. Taverns were often condemned from the pulpit as breeding grounds for sin, pride, gluttony, lust, and above all, sloth. They were seen as places where men squandered wages meant for their families, where women risked their reputations, where order could collapse under the sway of drink. Inns were not exempt from criticism either. A busy inn was a place where men and women might mingle without the watchful eyes of kin, where secrets could be traded in shadowed corners, where temptation could find a foothold in the weary heart of a traveler far from home. Disease was another shadow. In a crowded inn, sleeping too close to strangers could spread more than gossip. Fleas and lice were constant companions, and in years when plague swept through the land, both inns and taverns were eyed warily as possible points of contagion. The rushes on the floor hid more than dirt. They hid the living vermin that could carry sickness from one guest to the next. Yet for all these dangers, people kept coming. Part of it was necessity. If you were on the road, you needed a bed. If you craved company, you needed a place to gather. But part of it was also the thrill, the awareness that stepping into an inn or tavern meant stepping into a place where anything might happen. A profitable meeting, a fight, a friendship, a betrayal. The uncertainty was as much a lure as the warmth of the hearth. The difference lay in how you moved through these spaces. The inn required a traveler's caution. Watch your belongings, note your neighbors, keep your own story straight. The tavern required a local's savvy, read the room, know when to speak and when to hold your tongue. Keep one hand near your cup and the other ready to steady yourself if trouble boiled over. You remember the fight from your first night at the tavern, the look in the tavern keeper's eyes as he brought down his cudgel to end it. That moment was a reminder, no matter how friendly the night begins, every tavern has its breaking point. The trick is to leave before you find it. If you could stand in this muddy street for centuries and watch the inn and tavern across from each other change over time, you'd see more than just fresh coats of paint or sturdier beams. You'd see two institutions slowly shaping themselves into patterns so familiar that even today you'd recognize their descendants. Early in the Middle Ages, both were rougher, simpler, closer to the idea of someone's home thrown open for business. An inn might be nothing more than a few spare beds in a large hall, a fire in the hearth, and a pot of stew on the boil. The tavern could be a single smoky room where the alewife poured drink she'd brewed herself in the back, the air thick with the smell of wet wool and grain mash. But as towns grew, so did expectations. Inns began to offer more separation between guests, a small private room for a merchant with goods to protect a locked chest for valuables, perhaps even a stable boy to tend a traveler's horse. The idea of the innkeeper as a professional host took root. Clean rushes, edible meals, and a trustworthy reputation could mean the difference between a prosperous business and one that failed before winter's end. Taverns evolved in their own way. Brewing became more specialized, with dedicated brewers supplying drink instead of the keeper doing it all himself. Some taverns gained reputations for the strength of their ale or the quality of their wine. A good fiddler or storyteller could turn a tavern into the preferred gathering place, drawing not just locals but also travelers who wanted a taste of the town's social heart. By the later Middle Ages, inns and taverns had taken on clearer roles. The inn became firmly linked to travel, its location often deliberate near town gates, main roads, or river crossings. The tavern became anchored in the rhythm of daily life, often in the heart of the market square or just off it, where regulars could stop in before heading home. With this growth came the first real attempts at regulation beyond taxes. Town authorities might set maximum prices for lodging or ale, trying to keep profiteering in check. Some required licenses to run an inn or tavern, giving local officials more leverage to close down places that stirred too much trouble. And while both establishments had long been watched for disorderly conduct, by the late medieval period, there was more formal oversight: inspectors to check measures of ale clerks, to confirm a tavern's brewing records, even written rules about when drinking houses should close. The clientele also began to shift. The wealthier merchant might now expect an inn with finer food, and perhaps a private table away from the common bench. The tavern, too, might see a mix of customers, laborers in the early evening, more respectable tradesmen, later even a clerk or two who enjoyed a drink before heading home. And yet, despite these changes, the essential character of each place held fast: the inn as a temporary home for the traveler, the tavern as the nightly hearth for the community. In their own ways, both were shaping habits that still linger today. The idea that travelers should expect food, drink, and a bed under one roof that began here. The notion of a local, a favored drinking place where you know the regulars and the keeper knows you also began here. Even the quiet rituals we now take for granted, like gathering in the evening to share news over a drink, were daily life in these medieval rooms. The objects changed. Pewter mugs became glass, straw mattresses became feather beds, but the patterns didn't. People still sought the same things: rest, warmth, sustenance, and the company of others. And whether you found that at the inn or the tavern, it was built on the same ancient truth: hospitality is as much about the feeling it gives as the service it offers. The two signs across the street from you, one with its bundle of wheat, the other with its foaming tankard, might seem locked in their medieval moment. But they're also milestones on a path leading straight to the present day. The line from here to the inns, hotels, pubs, and bars of the modern world isn't a crooked one. It runs right through the rush-strewn floors and candle-lit benches of these two buildings, carrying their spirit forward century after century. Standing once again between the two signs, one neat and modest, one bold and inviting, you feel as though you've spent more than a single night in this town. You've crossed back and forth between two worlds that share the same muddy street, but live by utterly different rhythms. The inn, with its ledger and its polite nods, is the measured heartbeat of travel and commerce. The tavern, with its laughter, quarrels, and songs, is the restless pulse of the town itself. You've seen how the inn shields you in anonymity, giving you a clean bed, a simple meal, and the unspoken promise that tomorrow you can leave without a trace. You've also seen how the tavern pulls you into the current, making you part of a story that will be retold, reshaped, and remembered by people who've never even learned your name. In the inn, caution is quiet and straightforward. Watch your belongings, keep your coin safe. Thank the host, sleep well. In the tavern, caution wears a different face, read the room. Choose your company carefully, drink just enough to blend in, but not enough to lose your wits. One offers protection through distance. The other offers protection through belonging. Though belonging there comes at a cost. You've felt the comfort of the inn's early morning calm, its bread fresh from the oven, its fire steady and bright. You've felt the tavern's heat in the deep hours of the night, when voices weave together like threads in a thick, unruly cloth. You've seen that both are necessary, not just for those who use them, but for the town that depends on them, the inn feeding trade and travel, the tavern feeding fellowship and shared memory. And yet there's a shared root between them that can't be missed. Both are in their own way about hospitality, about the simple but profound act of opening a door and letting someone in. Whether that welcome lasts a single night or stretches over a lifetime, it leaves its mark. The inn remembers you in neat ink on a page. The tavern remembers you in the echoes of a song, the corner of a table where you once sat. If you linger in this town another day, you'll have to choose again the quiet, straw-filled bed under the bundle of wheat, or the warm, unruly night under the foaming tankard. Perhaps you'll even find your own rhythm between the two, learning when to keep to yourself and when to join the circle at the fire. Because in the Middle Ages, as now, the difference between an inn and a tavern isn't just in what they sell, it's in what they give. The inn gives you a place to rest. The tavern gives you a place to live, if only for a night. And the wisest travelers learn that in a world full of doors, sometimes you need to walk through both. And now, as the firelight fades from both rooms across the street, you let the scenes soften in your mind. The neat, steady glow of the inn's hearth, the warm, shifting shadows of the tavern's benches, the laughter that still echoes faintly, and the quiet nods of strangers who will never see you again. Both doors have closed for the night, and the muddy street between them lies empty under the hush of the late hour. You picture the inn's upper room, its straw mattress, its lavender-scented linen, the faint creak of beams overhead. Outside, the rain has stopped, leaving the air cool and still. Somewhere far off, a church bell marks the hour, the sound drifting over the rooftops like a lullaby. In the tavern, chairs have been pushed under tables, rushes, swept mugs stacked for tomorrow. The last embers glow quietly in the hearth, watched only by the keeper as he latches the door. The room rests now, gathering itself for another night of songs and quarrels, toasts and confidences, the eternal rhythm of welcome and parting. Your thoughts drift between the two, between the order of the inn and the chaos of the tavern, between the safety of distance and the warmth of belonging. Each has its place, its time, its own kind of gift. You've stepped through both doors, and now you carry their memories with you like a pair of well-worn keys. So let the street grow darker, the last glow fade from the windows. Let the sound of boots in the mud fade into nothing. You've walked the road, crossed the threshold, shared the fire. And now it's time to rest. The journey will wait. The doors will open again. But tonight, you can close your eyes.